from the Gospel of John. When the people saw that neither Jesus nor the disciples were there, they got into those boats and crossed to Capernaum looking for Jesus. When they found Jesus on the other side of the lake, they said, "Rabbi, when did you get here?" Jesus answered them, "The truth of the matter is, you're not looking for me because you've seen signs, but because you've eaten your fill of the bread. You shouldn't be working for perishable food, but for life-giving food that lasts for all eternity. This the chosen one can give you, for the chosen one bears the seal of Abba God." At this they said, "What must we do to perform the works of God?" Jesus replied, "This is the work of God, to believe in the one whom God has sent." So they asked Jesus, "What sign are you going to give to show us that we should believe in you? What will you do? Our ancestors had manna to eat in the desert. As scripture says, God gave them bread from heaven to eat." And Jesus said to them, "The truth of the matter is, Moses hasn't given you bread from heaven, yet my Abba gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is the one who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world." "Teacher," they said, "give us this bread from now on." Jesus explained to them, "I am the bread of life. No one who comes to me will ever be hungry. No one who believes in me will be thirsty." These are the words of God for the people of God. Let us pray. Gracious God, we come to you this day, hungry for the bread that you offer. We ask that you will bless it and bless each and every single one of us as we listen to the word that you're giving to us, as we explore how it is that you're calling us to be and do in this world. And now let the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Do y'all know my friends Milton Bradley and Hasbro? They're pretty cool in my books. I think game night should be every night, to be honest. And one of my all-time favorites is Monopoly. My siblings and I spent many, many, many hours beating each other at that lengthy game. If you've never played it before, essentially the object of the game is to buy, rent, or sell properties as profitably as possible, so that one person in the end would have the biggest stack of cash and properties. And this is why the game is titled Monopoly, in case you're wondering. For the most part, I enjoyed playing this game because this is how much time I got to spend with my siblings, or since then, my daughter and other people I enjoy, until I beat them, of course. While there's definitely a whole bunch of luck involved, there's also quite a bit of strategy one must employ. In addition to the hours of getting to interact with friends and loved ones, there's also something exciting about having to negotiate and barter and try to talk oneself into a better position for achieving Monopoly success. Another favorite of mine is the game of Life, even though I haven't played Life since, I'm pretty sure it was grade school. This was an incredibly fun game at the time, especially because it was a glimpse at some possibilities of what grown-up life might actually entail. The game had you starting at the end of high school, and then you had to make choices along the way. You can decide about going to college or not going, what career you wanted to have, and that would even determine how much money you would have on your paydays throughout the game. It had opportunities and obstacles along the way that could actually happen in real life. Having children or pets was rewarded, but it also poses risks in certain settings. Insurance rates and career changes showed up in the game as well. And if I'm remembering correctly, the objective of Life was to get through to the end of the game at retirement with the most amounts of money and assets. Unsurprisingly, the player with the most wins. I have to be honest, if someone were to break out one of these games right now, I would call dibs to be in the first round to play. I love games so much. But even so, I find myself wondering what in the world we're teaching children and society in general if these are some of the highest selling games in history. Monopoly has ranked #1 on several lists for decades. And life, even though it isn't in the top 10, has been around on the scene for quite some time. What are the values we're teaching our board gamers with fun and addictive games such as these? I think Jesus was addressing a similar matter as we hear it in John's Gospel. Just last week we heard how Jesus had fed the thousands with one boy's lunch and even had enough to send people home with leftovers. And after that whole scene, we heard about Jesus and the disciples leaving separately from the mountainside and crossing the sea to Capernaum. In that reading, that's when the disciples saw Jesus walking on water toward them, and he told them not to be afraid. And then the next day, where we pick up with our gospel today, the crowd saw that they were gone, so they also got into boats, and they went to Capernaum in search of Jesus. And when they got there, they found Jesus and asked him when he got there. What they really wanted to know was how he got there, since only one boat was missing from the shore. Instead of answering flat out in the way that Jesus does, he tells them the truth of the matter is, you're not looking for me because you've seen signs, but because you've eaten your fill of bread. Jesus calls them out for what he sees them doing, coming in for more to fill their bellies. But then he continues, you shouldn't be working for perishable food, but for life-giving food that lasts for eternity. This is the one the chosen one can give you, for the chosen one bears the seal of Abba God. And that right there is the key for the people following him those thousands of years ago, and even for us, those of us who follow Christ today. You shouldn't be working for perishable food, but for life-giving food that lasts for all eternity. And that simple truth goes against the grain of just about everything valued in our society. Following the underlying message of the board games that I so enjoy, one could relatively easily achieve and accumulate lots of stuff, especially in our part of the world. One could gain not just wealth, but status and power and even freedom, however it is that you would define those. Achieving and accumulating gives a person in our society bargaining room to negotiate how to live with a great degree of flexibility. Now please hear that this is not a sermon to shame those who are wealthy or to pin evil onto those who have much. The universe knows I'm on my own journey to better financial health myself. Money all by itself is not a problem. Wealth in and of itself is not a problem. The problem lies at the root of my favorite games and what I believe Jesus was addressing to those crowds that followed him. He was speaking out against the different things that keep us from partaking of the life-giving food that lasts for an eternity. Jesus walked on this earth to help make that accessible to all of us. And so we get caught up in the way it feels to achieve more and more and even more, seduced by the power and status that comes with having the latest and greatest this or that. It's so easy to slip into this addictive rat race that society presents to us as life. Not just the game, but the fate, the false reality that's all around us. You only have to watch TV for a few minutes to see all the products that'll make your life easier, better, more beautiful, faster, whatever promise the marketers make to hook us in. In a very similar way, these crowds that kept following and finding Jesus resembled their ancestors. the wandering people of Israel. We briefly touched on their stories in our time together here, but as a quick overview, the stories tell us of the way God delivered the Israelites out of slavery and oppression in Egypt. They find themselves in the wilderness, and after a while started remembering their oppressive days in Egypt fondly. Then they started complaining to Moses, accusing him of bringing them out to the desert to die. And then today, as Wayne read for us, they start complaining about their deep hunger. At least in Egypt, they always had food to eat. So Moses speaks to God, and God provides them with food. Manna falls from the sky every morning except for the Sabbath, and they were instructed to collect just what they needed for that day. So if they took more than that, it would go bad. And with the exception of the Sabbath, they were allowed to gather double portions so they can truly take a day to rest, which, by the way, is super profound for people leaving slavery. And I figure it's an important word for us today, too, as we live bound to productivity at just about any cost. But what happened next with the Israelites? They got comfortable with this miraculous bread of heaven and started whining about how bland the manna was. So Moses goes back out to God and asks on their behalf again, and this time God provides quail to go along with their magical manna. And after that, they started complaining of thirst, and through Moses, God provides them with water from a lifeless rock in the middle of the wilderness. And each and every time, God provides for and fills their needs. Each time, the people seemed only to be aware of the physical hunger before them and neglected to see how God was providing that and so much more. God repeatedly cared for these people. God took them from the hand of slavery, and God provided for them in the wilderness many times. Every step they took, God was right there with them. Even as they turned away from God and tried to worship idols, God remained faithful to them and continued to call for them to be in covenant. In that very same way, Jesus was trying hard to let those crowds know, to let us know, that there's something way better than these distractions and even the very real needs all around us. Jesus, the bread of life, offers himself to us. The promise that comes with the bread that he offers is that those who come to him will never be hungry. Those who believe in him will no longer thirst. And that's a truth that gathers us here week after week, that has the power to transform us. This truth has the ability to make us into a faithful people of God who take seriously this call to follow Christ, not just chasing after the next miracle as the crowds did, but to truly follow Christ in our thinking and even our being in the world. It calls for us to respond in ways that aren't always popular. Sometimes, often, we are called to be a countercultural people, as Christ was in his day. Where society places value, Christ may not. And in following the values Christ places before us, we find that hunger and thirst are no longer a thing. We find ourselves fulfilled in all that we do and say. And having said all of that, I truly can't think of even one person who has this balance mastered. If we're honest, we tend to more closely resemble the Israelites, who seem to have short and selective memories. But this is why we come to this sacred table, to be refreshed and renewed and reminded of the transforming truth that those who come to Christ will no longer hunger or thirst. I pray that we're able to release to God all those things that prevent us from recognizing these amazing gifts of God already in our lives. I pray that as we partake of this sacred meal on this day, we can be transformed once again into faithful followers of Christ. able to discern the call through all of the distractions and shiny things all around us. May this be our reality. Amen.